Hey everyone. Tonight, we're traveling somewhere colder, harsher, and older than most of us can imagine. Back to the Viking Age, to learn what it actually felt like to live through a Scandinavian winter. Before we start, take a second to like the video only if you really enjoy this kind of calm history journey. Subscribe if you'd like to wander through more forgotten seasons with me. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing this little global village gather before we step into the past. Alright, dim the lights. Maybe let the sound of a fan hum softly. Imagine it as the Arctic wind pressing against wooden walls. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the world going dark at 3 in the afternoon. The sun has already fallen behind a ridge of snow-capped hills. The air smells faintly of smoke and salt. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the Viking Age. The year is roughly 850 CE. You're somewhere along the coast of Norway or Denmark. Hard to say which because everything is white and still. The only color is the orange pulse of a dying hearth fire. You open your eyes inside a Viking longhouse. The roof beams are low, black with soot, and the rafters drip from the melt of yesterday's snow. Every breath fogs before your face. You sleep on a pile of sheepskins, pressed shoulder to shoulder with your family. 6 people? Maybe 7 if you count the hound curled near the coals. The heat from the central fire barely reaches the walls, and the wind squeezes through gaps in the plank and turf walls like thin knives. Your body is stiff, not sore, frozen. Even your hair feels brittle. You reach for the fur cloak beside you, shake the frost from it, and realize it's frozen stiff from the night before. When you move, your wooden bed creaks like a ship in ice. Someone coughs, someone else groans. You can hear water dripping, not from a leak but from your own breath, turning to condensation and melting again. You think about starting the fire, but the embers are buried in grey ash. To bring them back to life means blowing carefully for minutes until your cheeks sting and your hands shake. It's still black outside, so you work by touch, stacking splinters, feeding smoke. When it finally catches, a curl of orange light licks across the thatch and fills the longhouse with a smell both comforting and dangerous, burnt resin and hope. Forget coffee, forget toast. The Viking morning meal is whatever didn't freeze solid overnight. You find a small clay pot half buried near the hearth, wrapped in cloth. Inside is fish soup thickened with barley, boiled days ago. It smells a little sour, but hunger always wins. You sip, and it's lukewarm, the best you can hope for. There's no sugar, no milk, no soft bread, just salt, smoke, and the faint taste of iron. You chew slowly, trying not to think about how long this same meal will repeat itself until spring. Your stomach clenches, not from disgust, but from cold. Your body burns energy just staying alive, so you eat more than you want, and still feel empty. Someone opens the door flap to check the sky. The light that seeps in is blue, the color of bone beneath skin. A gust of wind rushes through the longhouse, scattering ash into the air. The dog barks once and curls back into a ball. Outside, snow has already covered the footprints from yesterday's wood-gathering trip. You'll have to start over. You wrap your cloak tight and step into the morning. The cold hits you like a solid wall. The air burns. Every inhalation stings the inside of your nose. Your eyelashes crust instantly with frost. The sound is strangest of all. Complete silence. No birds, no insects. Just the distant groan of ice shifting on the fjord. Your job is simple. Bring back wood, except there are no trees nearby. The Vikings have burned most of what grew close to the settlement, so you trek uphill toward the forest where pines still stand. Your boots crunch through knee-deep snow. Each step sinks with a wet sigh. The axe handle is smooth from use. Your gloves stiff with frost. By the time you reach the trees, your fingers ache and your breath feels like glass. You chop until your arms tremble. The wood is heavy with ice, impossible to split cleanly, but you take what you can carry. You drag the bundle back, leaving a thin red mark across your wrist where the rope bit through. In the Viking Age, splinters aren't an annoyance. They're a potential death sentence if infection sets in. You ignore it and keep walking. By the time you return, the sky is barely brighter than before. That's the first lesson of a Viking winter. The day never really begins. Back inside, everyone gathers around the rekindled fire. The longhouse smells of smoke, wet wool, and human sweat. Your hair steams as it thaws. Children sit with their hands outstretched toward the flames, faces half orange, half shadow. Someone is mending a net. Fishing is still possible, if the ice near shore breaks. Someone else scrapes frost from the inside of the walls. The frost always wins. In the corner, meat hangs from a beam, dark and hard as iron. It's been smoked for weeks, but you can still see crystals of salt clinging to it. Each piece is measured, rationed by the day. A few fish skeletons lie near the door, every scrap boiled for broth. The Viking diet in winter is a balancing act between calories and time. Run out of one before the other, and you join the long list of names carved into driftwood crosses, buried beneath the snow. You rub your hands together and listen to the wind whistle through the cracks. The roof creaks like a ship adrift. Someone mutters a prayer to Thor for strength, or to Freya for mercy. Here, faith isn't a Sunday ritual, it's what you breathe when the fire goes out. By afternoon, the light fades again. The sky turns grey, then purple. You realize the sun was a brief visitor, not a companion. The temperature drops fast. You pull your cloak tighter and help feed the fire with the last of your wood. Sparks fly up into the rafters where smoke collects like fog. Dinner is more of the same. Fish, grain, and silence. You can hear the sea ice cracking in the distance like thunder. Outside, wolves cry from the forest, their voices carried by the wind through miles of snow. Inside, everyone sits closer. The fire is small but bright, and for a moment it feels like a tiny sun the world forgot to take away. Before you lie down again, you press your hands to the ground and feel the cold coming through the floor. Your fingers ache, but you smile anyway. You survived one day, and in the Viking winter, that's a victory. But the worst is yet to come. Tomorrow the sea will freeze over, the fish will vanish, the firewood will run low, and the cold will start to decide who sees spring. You've learned how to wake up in the Viking age. Now you need to learn how to stay alive in it. The first real freeze arrives without warning. One morning the sound of the surf is gone. No gentle hiss, no crash, only silence thick enough to taste. You walk to the shoreline and discover the sea has solidified overnight, a sheet of dull grey glass stretching farther than you can throw a stone. Where boats once rocked against the tide, they now sit nailed to the harbour by ice. You kneel and touch the surface. It answers with a hollow echo, as if something enormous is sleeping underneath. That's when you realize the world itself has stopped moving. The men drag the boats farther inland, turning them upside down to keep the hulls from splitting. Nets stiffen into frozen lace. Fish barrels lined with salt stand in neat rows near the longhouse wall, lids sealed with fat. Every household has counted its stores. Grain low, dried fish. Adequate. Firewood. Never enough. There's no new food coming from the sea now, only what you've managed to trap beneath layers of salt and prayer. You help pour a layer of melted animal fat across each barrel, sealing the contents from air. The fat will harden to white wax in seconds. It's ugly, but it keeps life inside. Someone jokes that the gods eat first. The smell is offering enough. Nobody laughs long. The cold steals humor from breath. A single gust can turn a smile to ice. By midday, the settlement becomes a concert of hammers and axes. Men split logs while women patch the smoke holes with moss and wool. You notice how everything moves slower now, as if people have learned that haste wastes warmth. Even the dogs conserve their energy, curling tight as knots by the doors. You copy them without realizing it. Shoulders drawn inward, spine bowed to keep heat near the heart. Inside, the longhouse transforms. What was once an open room becomes a landscape of hanging hides, pots, and drying herbs. The air is thick with smoke. Your eyes water constantly. To see clearly, you crouch low where the air is cleanest. The smell is a mixture of tallow, pine pitch, and sweat, harsh but comforting. The hearth now burns day and night, fed by wood too damp to flame properly. It smoulders, whispering more than roaring. A reminder that warmth here is negotiation, not abundance. Each evening someone renders fat for light. The process is simple. Cut the frozen blocks. Drop them into an iron pot. Stir until the yellow grease rises to the surface. You dip strips of rush into it and lay them across a stick to cool. These become rushlights, thin, smoky torches that last an hour at best. When they gutter out, the room returns to darkness so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat echo in it. Hunger becomes a rhythm. You eat not because you're hungry, but because you fear what happens when you aren't careful. Meals shrink to rituals. A handful of dried fish softened in broth, a spoon of grain, sometimes a sliver of smoked pork, if someone's trap worked. The elders eat last. Children are fed first, not from tenderness, but arithmetic. Each one represents another season's hope. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, pretending the broth is thicker, hotter, infinite. The sea groans at night. Ice cracks like distant thunder, a sound that travels for miles through the frozen air. You lie awake listening, unsure if it's danger or reassurance. Sometimes the noise carries voices, echoes of fishermen caught beyond the ice, according to stories. You don't argue. Myths are insulation for the mind. Everyone needs something warm to wrap their fear in. When dawn finally returns, the horizon glows pale pink. Frost glitters on every nail and hinge. You step outside and look toward the sea. It lies still as stone, holding the reflection of the sky like a mirror no one dares to break. You whisper to it, unsure whether you're praying for thaw or simply for sound. Either way, the wind steals the words and hides them under snow. The world shrinks when the light leaves it. Days are little more than grey intermissions between nights that stretch like rivers of ink. You learn quickly that the fire isn't just heat, it's memory. It's the one thing that proves the sun still exists somewhere beyond the snow. Every Viking household has its own flame, passed from one log to another, with the tenderness you'd expect for a child. To let the fire die is to invite more than cold. It is to tell the gods you've stopped trying. When the darkness deepens, the settlement glows like a constellation, pinpricks of light scattered across a white void. From a distance, each longhouse looks like a lantern half buried in the earth. Inside, families cluster close. The air is thick with smoke and the slow hiss of sap inside burning pine. The flames spit and whisper, painting the walls with shifting patterns that dance like the spirits of their ancestors. The children stare at them until their eyelids droop. The adults listen for the crackle. That means the fire is eating well. Firewood is its food. Smoke is its breath. It must be fed carefully, never greedily. You learn the art of fire the way others learn language. First the base, split logs of birch and pine. Then the skin, strips of bark, curls of dry grass, chips of bone. Over it all, a whisper. You breathe gently into the ash, coaxing spark into glow. When it catches, you pull back fast, eyes watering, throat raw from smoke. The reward is small but vital, a tongue of light that grows with each heartbeat. The fire's rhythm becomes your own. By midwinter, fuel grows scarce. The nearest forest lies 3 miles away, its snow-laden branches creaking like ships at anchor. You and the others take turns making the journey. The trail is dangerous. Snow hides the frozen streams beneath it. One wrong step, and you'll find yourself knee-deep in icy water. The cold doesn't need to kill you outright. It just waits for exhaustion to finish the job. Each time you return with wood, the longhouse feels like a victory carved out of despair. At night, the fire becomes something else. A storyteller. Flames flicker against the rafters, casting shapes that resemble gods, beasts, and the faces of the departed. The old woman who lives 2 houses away says the dead walk in the smoke. When the fire sputters, it's because they found you interesting. You find yourself watching the smoke with wary fascination, half afraid to blink. The stories the flames tell aren't written in words but in motion, curling, leaping, vanishing. The Vikings called this elder, a living creature. They treated it as a guest that demanded both respect and fear. Sometimes, to stretch the fire's life, people burn things they shouldn't. Splinters of furniture, bits of rope, even dried seaweed. Each material changes the flame's color, blue for salt, green for resin. The hues are mesmerizing, but the smoke is toxic. You cough into your sleeve, eyes watering. There's nowhere to go for clean air, so you simply sit and wait for the room to stop spinning. Outside, the wind howls, demanding entry. Inside, the fire answers with a low growl, 2 predators circling one another. neither willing to yield. You start to understand why the Vikings worshipped warmth as much as they worshipped courage. Every ember feels like a small defiance, a refusal to freeze. The hearth becomes the center of all things. Food, light, safety, even faith. It's where stories begin and where prayers end. In this age, holiness doesn't come from temples. It rises from kindling. When someone dies, a piece of their final fire is sometimes carried to their grave. It's not superstition, it's continuity. One night, the storm grows so fierce that snow forces its way through the cracks in the roof. The fire sputters, drowning in its own smoke. You grab the bellows and pump until your arms ache. The air grows thick, suffocating. Finally, the fire catches again with a roar that feels alive. Everyone exhales at once. The smallest child claps. The dog lifts its head. For the first time in days, laughter rises. It sounds brittle but real. You realize that warmth isn't only about temperature, it's about proof of life. Outside, the wind still screams. The snow keeps falling, endless, unbothered, but you have firelight on your skin, smoke in your hair, and the soft sound of breathing all around you. The night is long, yes, yet for a moment you forget that spring may never come. You sit by the flame, watching it dance, and think, maybe this is what survival really means. Not conquering the cold, but learning to share the dark with it. By midwinter, the sea itself seems to forget what it means to move. The fjord that once carried longships now lies stiff under a crust of ice, so thick it hums when struck. You step onto it cautiously. The world below is silent, trapped water, holding its breath. Each step groans, deep and slow like something ancient waking. The horizon blurs. Sea and sky merge into one endless grey. Out here there is no land, only the ghost of it beneath your boots. The fishermen call this time Havsfängsel, the sea's prison. Boats stay hauled on shore, propped like carcasses against the snowbanks. The nets hang frozen stiff, crusted with salt and ice crystals sharp as glass. No fish comes willingly now. The cod are deeper than oars can reach, and the seals have vanished south. So the people turn hunters again. They follow the coast in groups of 3 or 4, carrying spears, hoping for a stranded whale or a fox foolish enough to cross the ice. Food doesn't arrive anymore. It must be taken. You join them one morning, wrapped in every scrap of wool you own. The air is so cold that your eyelashes freeze together when you blink. Your breath forms a tiny cloud that drifts ahead of you like a spirit guide. Each man carries a small wooden sled piled with nets, spears, and torches, sealed in oilskin. The sky above burns pale, not bright. Light here has no warmth. It's merely the absence of dark. They say the sea never truly sleeps. It dreams. Every few minutes the ice flexes, cracking in long, distant moans that echo across the bay. You can feel those vibrations in your knees. A reminder that beneath this frozen lid is an ocean waiting for the first sign of weakness. One misstep, one thin patch hidden beneath a dusting of snow, and you'll vanish soundlessly. No splash, no struggle, just the sea reclaiming what it loaned to winter. After an hour's march you reach the jagged edge of the fjord where open water still churns. There, a few men cut holes through the ice using iron-tipped poles. The rhythm, strike, lift, strike, lift, echoes against the cliffs like a drumbeat. They bait their lines with slivers of old fish, the smell sharp enough to sting even through frozen air. You sit beside them, watching the holes steam faintly, each a tiny portal to the moving world below. When a line jerks, there's a spark of joy so brief it feels like heresy. But mostly, nothing bites. Hours pass in silence, broken only by coughs and the brittle snap of wood as someone adds another stick to the small fire. You realize how thin the boundary is between life and stillness. The Vikings understood this intimately. Their gods were not distant deities, but moods of nature. Odin in the storm, Njord in the tides, Skadi in the frost. To live here was to live inside the divine, and the divine was often cruel. When dusk creeps in, the ice begins to speak louder. Long cracks spider outward, glowing faintly blue in the fading light. The men shoulder their sleds and start back, wary, Every few steps a low boom rolls beneath your feet. You don't run. Running means panic, and panic means falling. Instead you move with the same rhythm as the wind. Steady, deliberate. Behind you the sea exhales. Steam rises through the fractures like the breath of some imprisoned creature. Back in the settlement, the catch is pitiful. 5 small fish and a single gull snared in a net. Still, it's cause for celebration. The fish are gutted and smoked immediately. The gull plucked for feathers to patch a cloak. Nothing here goes to waste. Waste is a luxury for warmer worlds. The fire hisses as fish oil drips into it, filling the air with a sour, comforting odor. It smells like survival. That night the wind changes. It comes not from the north but the east, across the mountains, sharp and dry. The elders call it the wolf wind because it hunts. It tears through chinks in the longhouse walls, scattering ash and making every hinge groan. The sea responds by cracking anew, pushing jagged shards of ice onto the shore where they gleam under moonlight like broken teeth. You lie awake listening to them shift and grind, and it feels as if the world itself is restless, turning over in its sleep. By morning the fjord is alive again, not with water, but with noise. Pressure from beneath forces great slabs of ice upward, folding them into ridges taller than a man. The fishermen know better than to approach. One wrong move and an entire sheet can tilt, swallowing everything atop it. You watch from a distance as sunlight refracts through the new ridges, painting them in shades of turquoise and pale gold. For a moment, it's beautiful enough to forget the danger. Then a crack echoes like thunder, and beauty reminds you it has teeth. You step back instinctively, heart thudding, breath-forming clouds that drift away, proof that for now at least, you're still among the living. By late January, the cold no longer surprises you, it defines you. Everything you own, everything you eat, everything you think about is measured against it. The sun rises so briefly now that its light feels like a memory more than a miracle. The days between Yule and the first thaw are called the hunger months. The word tastes blunt and honest. Hunger does not creep. It arrives and stays. You feel it behind your eyes, in your teeth, in your dreams. The food stores are dwindling. Barrels that once smelled of salt and fish now smell of damp wood. The grain bins have shrunk to dust. You count every herring, every strip of dried meat, the way a monk counts prayers. The children ask when the cows will give milk again, and the answer is always soon, which means never soon enough. Every meal becomes a lesson in division. How to turn one fish into food for 5, how to make broth from bones that have already been boiled 3 times. You learn what hunger does to smell. When a neighbor bakes bread from the last of her barley flour, the aroma travels like a weapon. People turn their heads involuntarily, nostrils flaring. It's not envy. Not yet. It's instinct. You begin to notice how even smoke from the hearth seems to carry flavor. The air tastes of wood, fish oil, and need. The elders say this is how the gods test men, through the long emptiness between harvest and hope. You remember their stories of Odin fasting for wisdom, of Skadi hunting alone in the snow. But knowing myth doesn't quiet the stomach. At night, dreams turn edible. You dream of summer feasts that turn to dust in your mouth. You wake with your hands half closed around nothing. The settlement adapts. They grind pine bark and seaweed into the flour to stretch it. They boil moss until it softens. They scrape the fat from old tools and mix it with ashes to make a paste they pretend is food. You do not ask questions. You just chew and swallow and tell yourself the texture is a kind of comfort. The body learns to lie to itself. The mind learns to believe it. Sometimes on clear days you see people walking slowly along the shore, heads down, searching for anything the sea might have returned. Driftwood, a dead fish, a lost seal pup. The sea gives less than it takes, but it still offers hope. One afternoon a group finds a beached whale, half frozen and still breathing. The men argue over what to do. To kill it means meat and oil and survival. To leave it means mercy and a hunger that might kill faster. They choose to end its suffering. For days after, the village smells of smoke and flesh, a feast both sacred and terrible. The children stop playing. There is no energy for games. Instead, they sit near the hearth, quietly gnawing dried bones. Their faces seem older, hollowed by a wisdom no child should earn. Even the dogs grow thin. You hear their whines in the night, echoing with your own stomach, and still the snow falls, soft, relentless, indifferent. Illness follows hunger, like a shadow, scurvy, fevers, teeth that loosen and bleed. People grow quiet, their voices fading to whispers. You realize how thin the line is between survival and surrender. The fire no longer feels warm, it just reminds you how cold everything else is. You begin to measure time not by days but by the distance between one meal and the next. Then comes the first sign of thaw. A trickle of water runs beneath the snow. The air changes tone, smelling less like ice and more like mud. The people stand outside their doors, faces turned to the sky as if expecting forgiveness. No one speaks, they just breathe. Even the ravens sound different, less like warnings, more like announcements. But the thaw is a trick. The next day the cold returns harder, a reminder that spring is still only a story told by the fire. You begin to understand why Vikings believed the world would end, not in flame but in frost. Ragnarok wasn't some distant prophecy, it was every winter. Every year the world dies and waits to see if it will be born again. You sit by the hearth, watching embers collapse into ash, and feel the weight of those who did not make it through the night. No funerals, no songs, just the sound of snow covering everything that was warm. And still somehow you wake. Another day, another bowl of thin soup made from yesterday's bones. Outside, a sliver of light creeps along the ridge, hinting at dawn. It's not hope exactly, just the absence of despair. And for this moment, that's enough. You pull your cloak tighter, breathe smoke and cold together, and wait for the sky to change its mind. The hunger months don't end suddenly. They rot into something slower. Hunger gives way to weakness, and weakness opens the door for sickness. It begins with coughing, soft, apologetic, easily ignored. Then it becomes a rhythm, joining the crackle of the fire and the groan of the timbers, as one more sound the longhouse can't remember being without. In the Viking world, illness is not an event. It's a visitor that overstays, sleeping beside the hearth and whispering in your ear. You feel it first in your chest, a weight that never quite leaves even when you breathe deep. The air here is heavy with smoke, soot clinging to every beam, curling into every lung. Children wheeze, elders rasp. No one calls it disease, they call it winter. To them the body simply joins the landscape, cold outside, smouldering inside, both trying to consume what warmth remains. The healer of the settlement lives in the smallest hut, close to the river's frozen edge. You go there when a neighbor collapses. The air inside smells of pine resin and boiled bark. Bundles of herbs hang from the rafters. Angelica, yarrow, green ghosts of summer suspended in smoke. The healer grinds them with reindeer horn and mixes them into water dark as ale. You watch steam rise from the cup and think of spirits escaping. Whether the drink helps or harms, no one knows. Faith is half the cure. Sickness moves quietly through the longhouse. One night a man coughs until dawn. By evening his wife coughs in time with him. Children lie wrapped together for warmth, foreheads slick with sweat, even while frost creeps along the walls. You fetch snow in a bowl to cool them, and the snow melts faster than you expect. The body burns what the world has taken away. In the dark, the sound of breathing becomes a metronome. Steady, slowing, steady again. Every exhale is a small victory. People stop gathering in large groups. The feasts of Yule are memories now, replaced by whispers. Each longhouse keeps to itself. Each hearth guards its own smoke. The healer moves from door to door carrying a bowl of burning herbs whose scent stings the eyes but promises purification. Juniper, sage and a prayer murmured under breath. These are the walls against the unseen. Some call it miasma. Others say it's the spirits of those buried too shallow in frozen soil. You don't argue. Whatever name it has, it listens. On the coldest nights, you dream of warmth as if it were a person. You see a hand reaching from the firelight, offering comfort you cannot take. When you wake, your throat feels raw, your skin coated in sweat that chills instantly in the air. Every movement sends tremors through your bones. Still you rise. Work is the only proof of life. You feed the fire, scrape the ice from the doorway, check the traps along the shore. The world does not pause for fever. Then comes the fever wave. Half the village coughing, half too weak to stand. The healer mixes honey with herbs and snow water. The closest thing to medicine the North can give. You carry bowls from house to house. Steam fogging before your face. Inside each dwelling, the air is thick with breath and prayer. The firelight glows against faces hollowed by exhaustion. The sick murmur names of gods. Freyja for mercy, Ea for healing, Thor for strength. The same names repeat until they become rhythm instead of language. When one of the elders dies, there is no ceremony. The ground is too hard to dig, the air too cruel to linger. The body is carried to the frozen river and covered with stones until the thaw. No lament, no dirge, only silence and the sound of the river muttering beneath its ice. You realize that grief here is private, a flame hidden behind the hand to keep the wind from seeing it. Weeks pass inside the same dim room. You measure time by how the smoke stains deepen on the rafters. When the coughing lessens, people begin to talk again. Slowly, as if words themselves were fragile. They tell stories about those who survived worse winters. They remind one another that sickness is cyclical. Even death obeys a kind of season. You find yourself repeating a saying you once heard, "A man's breath is his bridge to the sun." You test the phrase aloud, watching the mist of your words rise and vanish. By the end of the long night, the fires burn lower but steadier. Some people are gone, others walk slower, thinner, quieter. Outside, the first birds return, ravens, black against white sky, laughing at the living and the lost alike. You step out into the brittle light and listen to the river cracking beneath its sheath of ice. It sounds like breathing again. For the first time in months, you take a full breath without coughing. The air cuts, but it also cleans. You realize the illness has changed you. Not weaker, not stronger, just more aware of the distance between one heartbeat and the next. The long night is over, though winter is not. You bow your head toward the thawing sun and whisper thanks, not for health, but for the chance to feel its warmth before it slips away again. The first sign of change is not warmth but sound. One morning you wake to dripping, the slow, deliberate rhythm of water finding its courage again. At first you think it's a dream, then you see the roof beams sweating, tiny droplets sliding down the soot-black wood. The long night is ending, light is crawling back. You've forgotten what unfiltered daylight looks like. Now it slides through the smoke hole like a blade. The color is strange, too clean, too honest. It shows every stain, every scar, every face thinner than it used to be. Outside, snow still covers everything, but it's no longer the crisp blue of death. It shines. The surface sparkles with grains of gold where the sun finally strikes it. The air smells of wet wood and thawing earth. Even the dogs seem uncertain, noses lifted, testing this new softness. After months of muffled silence, the world has texture again, the crunch of snow turning to slush, the drip of eaves, the hollow knock of melting ice against the shore. The first person to notice the real thaw is the woodcutter. His axe, once dulled by frozen bark, sinks cleanly into living wood. Sap runs where it shouldn't, sweet and sticky on the blade. He laughs aloud, a sound so rare it startles the ravens. That laughter travels from house to house like a message. The light has returned. Doors open, faces appear. Eyes squint, unused to brightness. It's almost painful to see the world again, but pain can feel like proof. You step outside barefoot for the first time since autumn. The snow stings but doesn't bite. Somewhere below the ice a river speaks, a liquid murmur threading through cracks. It's the oldest voice you know, the sound of time restarting. The healer says the sun is closer now, that the gods have turned their faces back toward Midgard. The people mark the day with silence, then a meal, then a song so hesitant it trembles like a new flame. It isn't celebration yet, it's rehearsal for hope. The thaw is not gentle. The ice breaks with violence, great slabs tilting and collapsing into each other. The fjord groans and shatters, sending waves of cold mist rolling across the village. You stand and watch as the sea wakes, dark water flexing beneath floating shards that glitter like broken mirrors. Every crack and boom sounds like thunder held too close. People cheer anyway. Destruction has never looked so much like mercy. With the ice goes the smell of rot, the trapped winter air finally escaping. What's left behind is sharp and clean. You help drag the boats back to water. Their hulls are cracked, tar-peeled, ropes stiff as bone. Repairing them becomes the first true work of spring. Pine sap for pitch, sinew for bindings, prayers for steadiness. The sea demands respect before forgiveness. Each plank hammered back into place is a promise. We are not done yet. The light grows longer each day, stretching like a cat waking from sleep. People find excuses to be outdoors. They sit on upturned barrels just to feel the sun on their hands. Children laugh again. The sound is brittle at first, then fuller. The elders tell them not to trust the season too quickly. The north keeps its secrets, but even they can't hide their relief. After so much darkness, skepticism feels smaller than gratitude. Inside you clean the longhouse as though banishing ghosts. The ashes from winter fires are swept out and scattered on the snow as offering. Walls are scrubbed with pine boughs, floors sprinkled with crushed herbs. The smell of resin fills the room. You hang the fur cloaks outside to air and watch smoke drift upward from every doorway like incense. For months you've lived in survival's posture, curved, cautious. Now your spine straightens. The body remembers it can stand tall. The first fish caught after the thaw is treated as sacred. A young boy hauls it from the still icy shallows, a glistening silver thing thrashing with impossible energy. The crowd gathers, the healer sprinkles salt and murmurs words of thanks. When it's cooked, each person takes a flake no larger than a fingernail. The taste is sharp, alive. It floods the tongue with memory of salt spray, of freedom, of summers still waiting. The sea, newly free, looks endless again. The Vikings call this season var, the time of awakening. It's when men start shaping oars and sharpening blades, dreaming of distant shores. But before the raids, before the trade, there is ritual. Offerings of milk and honey are poured into the water for Njord, god of the sea. You watch the liquid spread across the surface, fragile rainbows rippling over ice fragments. For a moment the gods seem close enough to touch. Night returns, but it no longer threatens. The stars are bright, unfiltered by snow clouds. Their reflections quiver in puddles that didn't exist a week ago. You sit outside the longhouse, wrapped in furs too heavy for the new season, and listen to the water dripping from the eaves. Each drop is a note in a slow hymn of renewal. You realize that survival isn't a single triumph but a rhythm. Endure, 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 then breathe. The light doesn't erase the dark, it just teaches you to see it differently. You close your eyes, feel the faint warmth on your face, and know that for the first time in half a year the world has color again. The first time you smell the sea again, it's almost overwhelming. Months of wood smoke and damp fur have dulled your senses, but now the wind carries salt, sharp, raw, alive. It smells like freedom and danger. The ice is gone. The fjord is open water again, black and restless beneath the pale spring sun. The surface gleams with shards of light, a mirror broken into 1,000 trembling pieces. You can hear the waves slapping the shore, impatient, as if the ocean itself has been waiting for you to return. The entire village moves toward the water. It's instinct more than decision. After so many months of stillness, people crave motion, the kind only the sea can give. The longships, pulled high onto land before the first snow, sit tilted and skeletal, their ribs of oak exposed. They look almost animal, like sleeping whales waiting to wake. Now one by one, they are coaxed back to life. Tar is heated over open fires, black smoke rising into the bright sky. Men smear the sticky pitch along the seams of planks, sealing away the winter's damage. The smell is strong, bitter, and comforting. It's the scent of survival. You work beside them, your hands raw from rope and cold. The sound of hammers striking iron nails echoes along the bay. It's rhythmic, purposeful. Even the children help, fetching buckets of water to cool tools, scraping away the barnacles that have crusted onto the hulls. Viseri tu saungan savanuns. The air hums with energy, the kind that comes from doing something ancient, something your ancestors have done for centuries. The longships aren't just boats, they're veins carrying life from land to sea and back again. By afternoon, the first ship is ready to test the water. The entire village gathers at the shore to watch. The men strain against the ropes, heaving together as the ship creaks and slides down the wooden rollers toward the fjord. For a moment it hesitates, balanced between land and water. Then it tips forward and splashes into the black depths with a crash that sounds like thunder. Everyone cheers. The ship rocks, rights itself and floats. After months of stillness, that simple sight feels like a miracle. The sea has always been both mother and monster. It gives fish, trade, glory, and it takes lives without remorse. The villagers know this, but they worship her anyway. That evening, before the first voyage, a ritual is held at the shoreline. A small fire burns on a flat rock, its light flickering against faces turned solemn. Offerings are laid beside it. Bread, mead, and the heart of the season's first fish. The healer, now wearing a circlet of dried herbs, chants quietly to Nera, the god of the sea, and to Ran, the goddess who drags drowned men into her net. Everyone listens. The waves seem to listen too. You pour a small bowl of mead into the water. It spreads like gold over the dark surface before dissolving into nothing. For a moment, the ocean seems to sigh, a long exhale that sends ripples over your boots. You whisper a prayer without realizing it. Not for fortune, not even for riches, but for return. The sea gives no promise, but you feel her power in the air, heavy and infinite. You understand why the Vikings called her a living thing. The next morning dawns with a sharp wind. The sun, higher now, glitters across the water like scattered coins. The longships are fully loaded. Nets, barrels of salt, spare oars, weapons and dried meat wrapped in linen. The crews wear wool cloaks, leather boots and belts heavy with knives. Their breath fogs in the chill air as they push off. The boats cut through the shallows, oars dipping in perfect rhythm. You stay behind, standing on the beach as the hulls grow smaller and smaller, their dragon heads glinting before they fade into mist. The fjord swallows them without a sound. The sea is not gentle to those who return too soon. The melt water from the mountains feeds her temper. Cold currents twist unpredictably, hiding icebergs and invisible whirlpools. The first journey after winter is always a test. You can imagine what it feels like to be on board. The wind cutting through wool, spray stinging your face, fingers cramped around the oar. The horizon stretches forever, the same line of grey no matter how far you row. Every creak of timber sounds like a heartbeat. Every wave feels like a question, will you make it back? For those who stay, the village feels both empty and alive. Women mend nets, children gather driftwood, and the air fills with the calls of gulls. The shore smells of tar and fish. At night, fires burn bright, but the beds are half filled. You hear wives whispering prayers to Ran and Freyja, their voices soft as wind in grass. You sit by the water, watching the faint lights of the ships far out in the distance. Each flicker looks like a heartbeat against the dark. Days pass. The snow on the mountains retreats higher and higher. The river swells, carrying silt and branches into the bay. The sound of water is constant now, dripping, gurgling, roaring. Then, one afternoon, a cry echoes from the cliffs. A lookout points to the horizon. Sails. The first ship is returning. You run with the others to the shore, heart pounding. The wind carries shouts before you can see faces. The ship glides into the fjord, hull streaked with salt and seaweed, crew drenched and grinning. They bring barrels of herring, bundles of driftwood, and stories that fill the night. But not every ship returns. You learn that too. Some never find wind. Some vanish into fog. The ocean takes what she wants. When days stretch into weeks with no sight of a missing vessel, the villagers hold another fire at the shore. Names are spoken into the smoke, carried by the wind. There are no bodies to bury, only memories. The healer tosses white stones into the waves, symbols of bones carried home by the tide. The sea does not answer. She never does. Still, the life of the village begins to pulse again. The thaw has turned fields to mud, but seeds are being saved. tools sharpened. The forge glows red in the twilight as iron meets anvil, each strike ringing with purpose. Children chase each other through puddles. The old sit in the sun, soaking it into thin bones. The rhythm of existence, the breath of land and sea, returns. The ocean no longer looks hostile. She looks familiar again. But you know now that familiarity isn't safety. You sit at the edge of the water one evening, toes buried in wet sand. The tide slides in quietly, brushing your boots. You think of all the winters before, and all the ones yet to come. Survival, you realize, isn't something you achieve, it's something you repeat. The sea calls again, not with promises, but with challenges. And despite everything you've seen, despite the hunger and the cold, despite the memory of ice cracking like thunder, you feel the call in your chest, deep and irresistible. You understand now why they go back. The sea isn't just where life begins for the Vikings, it's where life keeps proving itself. Summer in the north is not gentle. It is a fever. After months of dim light, the sun now refuses to set, rolling along the edge of the world like a bright coin that never stops spinning. Shadows shorten, then vanish. The air hums with insects, heavy with salt and pine. For a few brief weeks, everything grows at once: grass, courage, restlessness. You can feel the world expanding again, and with it the people. The same men who trembled through the dark now stand tall, eyes fixed on the open sea. The fjord that once trapped ships in ice now flashes silver under a restless wind. Long ships drift in their moorings like animals straining at leashes. Nets dry on poles, new sails hang from racks, smelling of wool and tar. The village beats with the rhythm of tools, the thunk of hammers, the rasp of whetstones, the ring of axes splitting planks. No one wants stillness anymore. After so much waiting, motion itself feels holy. You walk past the forge where sparks leap like captured stars. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow with a forearm streaked in soot. He works without pause, shaping nails, fittings, spearheads. Every tool he makes could build or destroy. He doesn't seem to care which. The boundary between survival and ambition blurs in the summer heat. What began as a fight to endure becomes a hunger for more fish, more land, more glory. The first voyages of the season are for trade. Small crews cross the ford to barter for grain, wool and iron. They return with stories of southern markets already rich with goods the north cannot grow. Each tale feeds the next man's imagination. Soon talk of trade turns to talk of raids. The difference is only permission. The sea that saved you now tempts you. It whispers of easy spoils beyond the horizon. On a warm morning you help load another longship. Barrels of dried fish, casks of water, weapons wrapped in oiled cloth. The air smells of tar and ambition. The chieftain, broad-shouldered and scarred, lifts his hand to the crowd. He says the voyage is for trade, but everyone knows what happens when swords travel farther than words. Still the people cheer. After winter, even danger feels like proof of life. You stay behind to tend the fields. The thawed soil drinks greedily from every rain. Barley pushes up through mud, bright and fragile. You plant in silence beside others, shoulders brushing, hands stained black. The same hands that once held axes now cradle seedlings. Survival requires both. When the wind shifts you can still smell the sea. It smells of absence now, half of the village gone chasing its promise. Weeks slide by. The sun barely dips below the mountains before climbing again. Sleep becomes a rumor. Children play in the fields long past midnight, their laughter echoing across water that glows copper in the eternal dusk. The healer says the land itself must be dizzy from so much light. You understand what she means. Abundance can unbalance a soul as surely as hunger. Then, at the height of the growing season, the first ship returns, not with goods but with silence. Its crew rows slow, faces drawn, eyes turned downward. The prow is splintered, the shields dented. One man's seat is empty. You watch from the shore as they pull in, and no one speaks. The sea, generous as ever, has reminded them of her price. The lost man's cloak is draped over the dragonhead prow. It flutters in the warm wind like a warning. The funeral is brief. Stones, a name, a drink poured into the soil. Then work resumes. That's how the North heals, through repetition, not reflection. The rest of the ships return with cargo, salt, cloth, tales of far harbors. The village feasts, but even in laughter you can hear restraint. Everyone counts how many sit at the table and how many do not. By midsummer, the world explodes in green. Grass hides the graves. Flowers burst through cracks in the rock. Bees hum like engines of creation. The air shimmers with life. But you know it will not last. The North gives fiercely and briefly. You spend your days in the fields, your nights near the shore, half listening for sails. The balance between land and sea feels fragile, as if both might vanish, if left unattended. On the longest day, the settlement holds a celebration for the sun's triumph. Fires are built on every hill, drums echo against the cliffs. The sky refuses to darken. People dance in circles, their shadows spinning beneath their feet. Mead flows, songs rise, and for a few hours, even memory loosens its grip. You tilt your head back and stare into the endless light, half blinded, half blessed. Somewhere inside you, a quiet thought surfaces. Was this what we endured winter for? When the sun finally sinks below the ridge, briefly, almost apologetically, the sea turns molten gold. You walk down to the water and watch reflections tremble. The tide licks your boots, warm for once. Behind you, laughter continues. Ahead, the horizon glows. You think of all that has changed in one cycle of seasons. Last winter, you feared the dark. Now you fear the brightness, its promise, its demand to begin again. The next morning, the fields hum with flies and the sound of scythes. Grain bends under its own weight. The harvest has begun early. You realize that plenty is its own trial. Too much food can rot faster than it can be dried. Too much sun can crack the soil. The villagers work tirelessly, turning bounty into safety for the winter to come. The rhythm of survival reasserts itself. Reap, salt, store, pray. When dusk finally returns for real, the world exhales. The fjord lies still again, a mirror without ripples. Ships rock at anchor, their crews sleeping on decks, dreams filled with distant coasts. You sit on the same stone where you once watched the ice break and whisper the same small prayer, not for victory, not for wealth, only for return. Around you, the land glows in the last light of the endless day. Summer has given everything it has. Soon the balance will shift again. You understand it now, how survival in the North is a circle, not a line. The reckoning never ends. It only changes its season. Autumn in the North arrives quietly, like someone entering a longhouse after dark. The sun lowers by inches each day. The air thickens with damp, and the sea turns darker, heavier. You hardly notice the first frost until it crunches under your boots one morning. Grass that gleamed green a week ago now shivers silver. The light is softer, almost shy. It paints the world in bronze and smoke. The season of reckoning is over. The season of memory begins. The fields stand full and heavy. Barley bows under its own weight, and the heads of rye whisper against one another. Everyone moves slower now, conserving strength for the final push. Scythes flash, straw falls in long golden waves. The sound is soothing, rhythmic, certain. You can tell how much people trust that sound. It means there will be bread and beer, and perhaps a little peace. After so many months of cold, even labor feels like luxury. You join the harvest line. Hands ache, shoulders burn, but the work binds everyone together more tightly than any prayer. The same men who once rode into battle now cut stalks with gentleness. The women weave the sheaves and stack them into stooks that catch the last warmth of the sun. Smoke from small fires drifts across the fields, mingling with the scent of ripe grain. Somewhere a horn sounds deep and slow, marking noon, the old rhythm that still governs everything. When the final rows fall, the children gather the loose stalks and toss them into the air, laughing. Their laughter feels fragile, as if the wind might steal it. The healer walks the boundary of the field, scattering handfuls of salt into the furrows. It's a blessing, a promise to the soil that it will be fed before it sleeps. The people believe that every field has a spirit. Neglect it, and next year's harvest will vanish into frost. The threshing begins. Wooden flails strike rhythmically on packed earth. Grain leaps from husk, gold dust rising in sunbeams that cut through the barn's slats. The air tastes of chaff and sweat. You find yourself moving to the rhythm without thinking. Every motion answers the one before, a language older than speech. The Vikings measured time not in hours but in tasks. Day ended only when the work was done. Evening brings a silence almost sacred. The fields lie bare, except for scattered stubble shining like short bronze hair. In the distance the fjord mirrors the sky's fading color, blue melting into copper. The gulls have grown quieter. You can feel the year curling in on itself, preparing to sleep. Inside the longhouse, baskets overflow with grain. The smell is warm and nutty, a smell that means survival. Someone hums an old tune while sweeping stray kernels into a bowl. You recognize the melody. It's the same one sung during the first thaw. The circle tightens. The next day is for storage. Clay jars are sealed with wax. Barrels are stacked near the hearth to stay dry. The meat racks fill again. Fish, venison, even wild goose caught in the marsh. Salted, smoked, hung high. You turn each piece carefully, feeling its weight. Every ounce counts. The dogs linger near the doorway, hoping for scraps. You toss them bones, they bury them immediately, their own small insurance against hunger. Outside, the first geese fly south in a wavering verve. The children point and cheer. The elders watch in silence. The birds remind them that migration is only another word for survival. Some men will soon sail again, carrying the last trade goods before the sea closes. Others will stay to mend roofs and walls, to tighten what winter will try to pull apart. The village hums with calm purpose. Everyone knows their role in the cycle. A week later, rain arrives. It falls softly at first, then steadier, turning the fields to mirror pools. Smoke bends under the weight of moisture. You sit in the doorway, watching droplets trace lines in the dirt. The world feels smaller now, enclosed. The smell of wet earth is almost sweet. Rain is promise and warning both. The ground will rest, but soon it will freeze. You pull your cloak tighter and listen to the steady drumbeat on the roof. Inside, talk turns to preparation. New rushes for bedding, moss for insulation, tools repaired, clothing patched. The healer mixes herbs into oil for winter coughs. The blacksmith makes hinges for the doors that warped in summer heat. The rhythm of repair is soothing. It feels like building walls around the memory of hardship. Everyone moves with practiced patience, neither hurried nor idle. You realize that the real lesson of the North isn't endurance. It's timing. Know when to act, when to rest, when to hope. When the rain clears, the air smells sharper, cleaner. The mountains are dusted with new snow, a white reminder of what waits. The sea has turned steel grey again. It's calm, deceptive. You walk to the shore. The tide is low, the rocks slick with seaweed. You find the stone where you watched the first ice crack months ago. It feels smoother now, worn by waves, by time, by memory. You sit there and watch the horizon. Somewhere beyond it, other seasons are beginning, but yours is ending. The final feast comes a few nights later. A barrel of mead is opened, flatbread baked on stone, the last fresh berries crushed into sauce. The longhouse glows like a lantern in the dark. People eat slowly, talking softly, grateful for fullness instead of silence. The healer lifts her cup and toasts the season to fire, to fish, to frost, and to whatever comes next. Outside, wind rattles the thatch, but no one flinches. They have learned to hear it differently now. Not as threat, but as rhythm. After the meal, you step outside. The moon is high and thin, the stars cold but bright. The fjord glows faintly where it meets the horizon, a long stripe of silver. You breathe the air and taste salt, wood smoke, and distant snow. The same mixture that carried you through the dark now feels familiar, almost comforting. You realize that survival isn't about mastering nature, it's about becoming fluent in it, learning to read its moods and listen to its pauses. Dawn comes late the next morning. Frost edges every roof, every rope. The fields, empty now, gleam white. Smoke rises straight into the still air. The dogs bark once, then fall silent. You can sense the village bracing itself, not in fear but in readiness. The first chill of true winter is back, but this time it's expected, invited almost. The people have their stores, their fire, their stories. They have learned how to live with the dark instead of fighting it. You stand on the threshold of the longhouse, watching your breath mingle with the cold. The sea beyond lies calm and black, reflecting a thin strip of orange from the rising sun. Somewhere out there, the waves are already thickening, remembering ice. You pull the door closed and hear the latch settle, a sound that marks both an ending and a beginning. The last harvest is done. The circle is whole again. In the quiet, you finally understand in the north. Survival isn't triumph, it's tradition.